It's amazing what we have, but we've lost a lot that we don't even recognize. One is just that connection to the land and to each other really does speak to you in a way that we have a hard time grasping at nowadays.
What's up, man? Thanks for jumping on here.
Well, thanks, Josh.
Famous alone Jordan Jonas mountain man.
Right. Well, I've been wanting to come by for a long time. You guys live not far, and I drive by quite often. And man, I got to swing over there and get to know those guys. So it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. No, we actually we connected. I'm trying to remember when we first, because I think you were living in Idaho, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
And was it right after the show?
Yeah, after the show, that gave us the ability to move back out west, and so we were debating between Idaho and here.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
For a while, we were living up at my mom's farm up there in Idaho, and
I think that's when. And you guys were actually looking at property in Montana, or kind of figuring out what your options were. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wild, and that's been what, a couple years ago.
I think we've been here about 3 years.
What year were you on the show?
2018. It aired in 2019, and then
okay,
who knows when it came on Netflix and stuff. But yeah, it was probably around 2020 or something. We got a hold of each other.
Which that's the year I started the company.
Oh wow, yeah, pretty early.
It's wild. Like things changed a lot for both of us in 3 years.
Kidding, huh?
You know?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, it's been awesome to tour around your place and see what you guys have built in such a short period of time. That's impressive.
No, I appreciate it.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's been cool. So what are you running some like, I don't want to call them survival camps. Maybe they're survival.
It's hard to know what to bill them as, but I've after the show I thought, well, I didn't really know survival, courses were quite a thing until I got on the show. A lot of the other people I was with were survival trainers, Yeah. Like, oh, that's interesting. So after the show, my brother and I were like, hey, should we try running some courses or whatever? And we ended up actually getting connected with an outfitter up here and started running courses up there. And we were kind of figuring it out as we went, how hardcore to make them and kind of how to build those courses out. And now we've really settled on some pretty cool formats, but I wouldn't say it's hardcore. I really like introducing people to the wilderness that don't realize what we have and don't really have the confidence or whatever to get out there by themselves.
Yep.
And so empowering people to do that is one of the core focuses of some of my courses. And then I do some more hardcore ones where we really get into some, really wild places and some pretty neat stuff.
I would imagine there's people. You take a person like myself that's grown up here, you tend to think you kind of are pretty hardcore, a lot of survival stuff, just because we tend to live a little more, we hunt, we're in the mountains, we
connected
camp.
To the outdoors.
We think we are anyway. And then I'll be honest, I always kind of considered myself pretty capable, still do, but so I would think I would be one of those guys that'd be like, yeah, I want to do the hardcore course.
Right.
But then, from watching the show, honestly, and I it's funny because I was on that show Forged in Fire.
Yeah.
And I don't know what your opinions or whatever of Alone are, but most of those shows on TV, most of the quote unquote reality shows, there's a lot of bullshit, right?
Right.
But when I was on Forged in Fire, there's things that aren't perfect. Anytime you do that much filming and you spend that much time and then you watch it on TV, you're like, God, they cut a lot of cool stuff out.
Totally.
And that's not they make making knives look like it's just super simple. That happened in 45 minutes. That was pretty cool. That's easy.
Yeah.
We filmed a lot more than that. But what I really actually think Alone has shown me that I actually give Alone a lot of credit for is it's shown me just how many pieces of knowledge that I don't have, so many techniques that I've never seen before, and I watch people on there, and I'm like, man, I'm not as capable as I thought I was.
Right.
You put me up there and, go tell me to make a net, You know, was it you that strung the net between the two fishing holes?
Yeah.
I thought that was you. I should be more prepared for this. Like,
you don't need to watch any more TV.
Yeah, we don't watch much, but Alone is actually one that we do watch because I see the different deadfalls and the different things people do and things to store their meat and keep it away. And like, I realized to myself, like, as much as I like would kind of think that I'm ready for the advanced class, man, I'm not. Like, I actually compare it to, I was at an event one time and they had a bunch of rifles out there. It was at Winter Strong at Sornex at Burt Soren's, and this sniper dude, bunch of us standing around, bunch of guys just like me. Hey, who knows how to shoot? Like, we all raise our hand.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. So then he starts into his course, and I'm telling you, like, he talked for a minute, and I was like, God dang, I should have kept my hand down.
Right? No, it's great. It's great to, I mean, I'm always learning stuff too, you know, it's an infinite amount of knowledge out there, even in a particular niche, you know, so.
Do you find people that come for your classes that think they're at a one level and they realize real quick that they're not?
I think that happens most often. You know what the mountains are like around here. It's pretty rugged. I think that happens most often physically. I'm pretty good at walking people through, you know, I like taking to people of all knowledge levels. And so if somebody I can tell needs a little more help on the knowledge side, we can do that. But if you overestimated your ability to go up and over a mountain, you know, and it can be pretty rugged out there. So I think that's what, analogous to what you're saying with the rifles and who can hike, you know, it's like everybody raises their hand, but
I do CrossFit. I can hike.
Yeah, right. It's tough up there, which I think is cool. It's part of the experience is pushing people beyond what they thought they might be able to do initially. I think that's pretty awesome. But I'd say that's where people overestimate their skills the most. I think people, like I said, I'm pretty open to any skill level. As long as you have a good open mind and attitude
towards learning,
you can make it. Yeah. And you can,
do you think teaching is one of your favorite things that you do?
Yeah, I guess it is. It's a kind of a core of what I do. I don't know if I would say directly teaching or just facilitating and being there to help. I'm teaching things, but that's just a framework for, nature to give its own lessons. And I just like facilitating that whole, it's awesome to watch, especially a lot of people nowadays who they've not been a day without their phones or they're, always behind the computer. It's pretty cool to realize, where you go when you have the mental space to get disconnected. And so all of that, is that me teaching? I don't know, but that's me helping facilitate that. Right. That's what I like to do. Yeah.
That's the thing about hunting. I've always told my kids, like when we go out, for example, when we go out to the Missouri River breaks, since they were pretty young, I would take them out there and take them deer hunting. And it's kind of like, it's 100%, it's kind of the middle of nowhere out there.
Right.
And it's also not a place at all that you would go as a tourist. 'Cause like where we drive, I mean, we're going to a small town and then we're driving another 40 miles on a dirt road through some people's kind of farms and ranches and getting to some public ground and then hiking off into this country that is so like rough and rugged for where it's at. You know what that Missouri River break stuff is like. And when I'm sitting out there with my kids, I'm just like, the only reason that you guys get to see this is because we hunt. And that's the cool thing about hunting is everybody, I think a lot of people have a misconception about hunting that it's all about killing an animal.
Yeah.
And I tell my kids, I'm like, all right, let's sit here for a second. Like, imagine seeing right now, if we're sitting here, we're an Indian sitting here and we see Lewis and Clark paddling up the river.
Right.
Like they were seeing this country for the first time.
Yep.
And all its ruggedness, all the animals that were around, the new birds they were discovering. I actually just got done listening to the book Undaunted Courage.
Oh, cool.
And I'd like to say I read it, but I listened to it.
As we all do.
As we try to, carve out 10 minutes here and there. And it's hard to not just close your eyes and think about like what they saw and what the Native Americans were like and what they were experiencing and they saw. And I'm actually quite jealous of I'm not jealous of some of the lack of comforts that they had because they lived a tough life, but I'm highly jealous of what they got to see that we'll never see. And
Yeah.
you know, you've seen it in parts of this globe, I think, that most of us won't.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I went and lived. So to give a little backstory to that, I ended up in Russia. I went over there initially to help build this orphanage, and then wanted to live with some Russian folks. So the American guy I was with, sent me to some other village, and I lived with some Russian families.
Were they like Azinki or something?
Well, yeah. And so the guy I lived with, the Russian family, I spent a year with them, and we would cut hay with a sai and milk the cow every day. It's very Russian village life. But then he had been in prison with a native Evenki, they're called. Evenki guy. And that guy was a fur trapper. If you've ever seen Happy People, that documentary.
Okay.
It's worth watching. But it's just Siberian fur trapper. And he came down one day and invited me to go live with him. And so I did. And we went and fur trapped for a season and did some really cool stuff up in the far north of Siberia. And then once he got to know me and I earned his trust and all that, he was like, oh, well, all his cousins are still nomadic, reindeer herding people who live in the forest. And so he took me out and dropped me off at his cousin's teepee, basically. And I didn't know people like that still really existed, especially in that, authentic of a way. And so it kind of blew my mind. And so I spent some time with him and loved it, and immediately, came back to America, earned some more money, got a new visa, and went back and ended up spending, several years with him. And to your point, it was fascinating to me to catch a real glimpse of what we've lost in our modern society. We've gained so much through comfort and not to take it for granted. A bad hunt's kid's not gonna starve. It's amazing what we have, but we've lost a lot that we don't even recognize. One is just that connection to the land and to each other. It's cool to have these teepees and the kids just run from one to the other, and then they're just gone all day playing around outside. And just that sense of community that comes from that, and the lack of a schedule. There's a lot of things that are really our psyche's tuned for that we miss out on now because we're all scheduled and we're all distracted and so catching a glimpse of that, even though I was in a very harsh climate, this is northern Siberia, I often thought to myself, I wonder if, especially if we were in a nicer climate and it was my native language and my family, I wonder if I wouldn't choose this over the modern life anyway. And not only myself, someone who's interested in the outdoors, but I wonder if not everybody would choose this. Even if I took somebody from New York City and we went out there and they got a real glimpse of it, aside from the hardship of the mosquitoes and the cold, it's I wonder if they would actually choose it, because it's really does speak to you in a way that we have a hard time grasping at nowadays.
Were they very community family oriented? I mean, did you see issues with this guy being kind of egotistical and having issues, personal issues with the other guys in camp, or was it more of a community we're just all in this together?
Well, that's an interesting question, because not to idealize it too much, it's there's definitely interpersonal issues, and the guy that's the leader and his brother always arguing about this and that, but it is that small group dynamic. There's only so many families out there, and so there is accountability among, just being in a small group, which keeps all that in check. But, it's like living with your family. There's always issues, but that's a complicated question, because more importantly, I think just and this is all throughout Russia, which is a fascinating culture, really rich history, but it was so perverted by the Soviet time that it's there's so much that's awesome that is still in Russia in spite of that 70 years, but there's so much that was lost. And even the organization of the tribes and stuff they sent all the people that had lots of reindeer to prison camps because they were rich people. And then and so then the people that were left were less good at it, but then they didn't organize them in family units. They forced collectivized them and put them in, you're now a worker, and we'll pay you a wage, but those aren't your reindeer. Those are government reindeer.
It's basically when white people came along here and started to
mess with the
Stir it up.
dynamics. And so then with all that said, now there's issues left over from that. And it's also the alcoholism is a inherent, it's a permanent issue over there. That said, I ran into a lot less ego over there than I would just in an everyday situation here. Like the people were really, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but really just simple, like friendly, like open people. It was just really cool, I got to know them very quickly. And so it's kind of that juxtaposition there, but it's not all, roses, but
right.
And there was a lot of, to be fair, there was a lot of chaos over there, and mostly because of the alcohol. I know the death rate amongst a young Evenki person over there is 1 in 3 people die of homicide, accident, or suicide. So that's 1 in 3. It's insane,
that's
and
terrible.
Every time we call back to Russia, I'm always like a little nervous to see what happened to who, and
it's unfortunate because it's gotten as an American to a place where you really can't go over there, like for the foreseeable future.
Right now, the political situation is really such a shame, and I'm in pretty good contact with some of those native guys. One of them, when I went over there, he was just 5, and now he's 20 something and has a little kid.
Really,
and but he's just got called over to the draft office just the other day. I was like,
they're even drafting those guys.
Yeah, they're just starting to. Like, they hadn't been for a while, and now
and he has to go fight a battle that.
Well, that's what I was telling him. I was like, Borka, I don't know what you read over there, but like, don't go. Like, go in the woods. Like, it's a meat grinder over there.
I wonder what he actually. We were discussing that about some other people that had gone over there, and they said they talked to some people that just they believe everything that's being put to them because that's all the information that they have, and of course they think that we're being propagandized, and let's face it, in a way we are also. But like we obviously have a lot more freedom of information, and we can have a dissenting opinion, but a lot of those people over there just have no idea what they're about to get into.
No, and especially those guys. That world's so far from them, but it's but the fact is they get caught up in it. It's like if you get your draft notice, this guy I'm talking about, Borka, he's not plugged into the news. He's just doing his thing in this little village up in northern Siberia. He gets a draft notice. It's like, well, you got to go to the draft office. If they draft him, he then has a choice right then to go to prison for 15 years or go or go to the front. Or he goes, and tries to flee the country, but he's some native guy in the north that just has no leverage in that. He doesn't.
No.
Yeah, so it's not an option, and that there's enough of that information out there, like you say, that in their head, I think they think it's probably like they've heard a little bit about the Nazis in Ukraine or whatever, and they haven't, like, they just don't have the information input to really counteract that. So they might just think, all right, got to do it. And
what was his reaction to you when you tried to explain a little bit about, like, hey man, this is not good?
Well, I just told him, it was a lot rougher over there than he probably realizes. Like, it's a pretty gnarly thing. And I was just like, man, you should probably just go back in the woods. Let him
look for you.
Let him look for you. And
they're not going to look that hard.
He laughed. He was like, yeah, I probably should or something. So I don't know. He had to sign his draft papers, but he didn't officially get drafted yet. But it's like, in case they need to,
which
probably will happen.
Coming.
So, and I have other friends over there, other really good friends who it's all something everyone's confronting, and they're all great people. Like, I had one friend, he was also in the orphanage that I would used to hang out with, a young kid, real smart, but he can't keep his mouth shut. So he actually had to flee the country. Like he went to Nepal, and now he lives in the Republic of Georgia over there. But he wasn't going to be able to keep his mouth shut. So he was going to have to go to prison or flee the country. He fled, but he had the means to. Yeah. Then I have another friend over there who, I've talked a lot with about. It's like, it's such a conundrum because you don't want to leave your family, everything you know, your work, and become a refugee before you even get drafted, because you might not get drafted. But then once you get drafted, you have to start 15 years in prison or go to the front. And you're like, well, maybe if I go to the front, I can like,
maybe the war will end in a year.
Maybe it'll end, or I can do something that's not on the front line. Anyway, so you have all these. It's tough, man. I've thought about it myself. Like, it's tough to put yourself in that
15
position.
years of prison is probably the only guarantee in it.
Yeah, right.
Like,
right.
You choose that and
you're getting
it ends next month somehow.
Goodbye family, goodbye everything.
You're in prison.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
So it's a real conundrum. I feel for him, and I hope it ends really soon. I'd like to go back myself, and they're all friends. And yeah,
it's incredibly unfortunate that doesn't matter what everybody's thoughts are or whatever, but that like people like that, and really just even in our own country, our own soldiers that raise their hand to defend our country, for what they did, get caught up in stuff that
geopolitics
that they have no, like, they're doing their job and they have a conundrum, but like they did raise their hand, so they go and they do the thing, but the thing is not something they believe in, and
right.
It's somebody else's thing.
Right.
It's not our thing.
It's so tough, man. It really is. It's the same thing working on those people as working on the Russian people, as working on the Ukrainians. It's the same. All be great people just caught up in these crazy geopolitics. And yeah, it's a shame. I watch it and am very sad about it. I was super bummed when it all kicked off, because Ukraine, Russia are both countries that I really like. I think I culturally, I think they're really neat. And I haven't lived in Russia, I was like, man, we have so much in common with these people. And just to see them become even more shocking was to see Russia and Ukraine become enemies, because everybody in Russia, half their family lived in Ukraine, vice versa. So it was like us going to war with Canada. I was like, what? I can't believe that happened.
Yeah.
And it's just geopolitics just got carried away, and now all these wonderful people are caught up in it, and
and these battles are happening. I follow some Instagram pages that are more. I mean, there's some brutal stuff on there, but I feel like you're actually getting the real thing.
Right.
Like, war's brutal, man.
It is,
like,
man. Nothing cool about it.
A friend of mine asked me, like, dude, why do you follow that? And I'm like, because that's what's, like, it's not a video game, man. Like, that's freaking real.
Right.
Like, that shit's real. That's what's happening. And that's what it looks like. And that's what everyone should actually see on the news every night. And they might think twice about, like, is this a good idea to send our people to? Like, is this worth it? And you see some of these battles happening, and what I do is, like, if you look past the tanks and you look past the trenches that they're dug out in, it's a beautiful farm,
right?
With like a farmhouse and a grove of trees that somebody planted 100 years ago, 5 generations ago, and it's this gorgeous farm with a nice little paved road running through it, and it looks like paradise,
right?
It looks like any other farm country in Montana. It looks like the Bitterroot Valley,
but full of wonderful people just growing
with
their plants
with a war that just came into their pasture. And now they're picking up arms. It's just I could go on about that, but it's just what it really is just unfortunate. It is.
And it does remind me, it doesn't mean that there's not just wars and stuff, but it does remind me that there's no winners usually. In most cases, it's like, well, Ukraine loses, Russia loses, everybody's losing right now, and it just is sad.
I mean, even some of the wars that, a long time ago that we actually, everybody can agree on that we won, World War II.
Right.
Just war to go do what we had to do. But there, even the winning side had a lot of losing involved in that.
Right.
A lot of tragedy.
Yeah. And, complex issues. Even when I think about everybody loses, there are some wars and some things that happen that are terrible, and in an unjust world, sometimes the bad guys come out on top. Like I had my whole family is Assyrian, and they went through that whole Armenian genocide and all that. And honestly, it was a genocide of a people in, what's now Turkey. And it was successful. They went from like a third of Armenian and Assyrian to 99% Turkish. And
really?
And that's it. Now it's,
when was that?
Ethnically cleansed. 1915. So my dad was born when my grandma was pretty old, or when his mom was like in late 40s or something. So it was actually my grandma and grandpa went through that genocide. So it's only one generation removed.
Did they have to flee then, or?
Mm-hmm. So if you want the story, my
pull that mic over there a little bit. Let's pull it towards you.
My family, so on my dad's side, they're all from Iran, and northwestern Iran. And when the Russian, during World War I and all that chaos, there was a real strong nationalist movement in what was the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, and it was kind of Turkey for the Turks, and they were having a pretty bad time at the war. And when that happens, you always look for people to blame, and they had a large minority in their country, and they blamed them, and so executed a very successful genocide. Like, they wiped out 75% of the Assyrian population on a whole, and
Damn.
Similar for the Armenians. And my grandparents were living in northwestern Iran. The Ottomans came in there. So my grandma, they came into her village, took her dad away to be shot. Then they drove her and her 6 brothers and sisters out into the desert, and her mom. And then they just drove them around the desert, and with all the raping and pillaging that goes on until they died. Basically, my grandma watched, 6 of her 7 siblings die. And
Damn.
then when her mom had a young baby, and when that baby died, her mom collapsed and was like, I can't go on any further. And my grandma and her sister picked her up. It's like, leave the baby, we got to keep going, and dragged her mom to her feet, and then actually bumbled across the British army camp and were saved. Her mom and her sister never recovered really, but she did. She continued on. So she was basically the sole survivor of her family. In an interesting anecdote, her dad, who had been taken off to be shot, was tied up with everyone else, and they were all shot, but they missed him. And I guess when, of course, as they all were, I'm sure, but he was praying, they were naked and all that, giving some clothes and some food, and everybody got shot. He got missed. They all fell together. They'd usually come behead everyone, but there was some kind of siren, and they all ran off. And so he was able to untie himself, went into some building, and found a T-shirt with a loaf of bread wrapped in it, got it, and he escaped. They both, the daughter, my grandma, and her dad, both thought each other was dead until 20 years later they met. They had some kind of crazy reunion.
Oh
Isn't
my
that
gosh.
insane? And then on my dad's side, or my grandpa's side, he was 17 at the time, and his dad was in a wheelchair. The Turks were coming in and burning down the whole village, and he said his dad shoved all the money in a little money belt, put it on him, and said, just run and don't turn around. And so Grandpa ran out and turned around to see his, whole house up in flames with his dad in it, and he never knew what happened to his sister. And he just ran and became kind of a refugee. Ended up getting taken in by some Jesuit missionaries over there in Iraq, I guess. And then, anyway, they both ended up as refugees in Baghdad and got married, and then fled right before World War II. They immigrated to France, and then they lived through the whole Nazi occupation there.
Oh my gosh.
And have a whole nother slew of stories, which is just wild, wild people. And then, the resilience they had to have. And then what I find really interesting about all of this, so I won't get into all the Nazi stories, but they were some of my aunts were in the resistance and have crazy stories. But when they got through it all, I didn't know my grandma and grandpa because they died before I was around, but I know all 11 of their kids and my aunts and uncles, and they were all really happy, joyful people, including my dad, really resilient, joyful person. And you just think, holy cow, how can a person one generation removed, whatever my grandparents did, they didn't allow that terror that they went through to define their future and their children's future. It's super interesting to look back now that I can recognize traits and this and that, which is cool, but I don't have the baggage that you would expect from just, one generation removed, which is pretty neat. It's something I ponder sometimes, and it's hopefully we all have the ability to endure unjust or just natural suffering and have such a
and let go.
Yeah, and have such a approach to it that it's not a ball and chain for those around us. Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you can look at it and think, and by rights, they have every right to be bitter and messed up for life, and pass those traits down to their kids, and say, these are the people we hate, and this is why, and have every reason.
Yeah, that's so funny, because I didn't even, growing up, I didn't even know who did what to us. Like, it wasn't really a thing anyone talked about. It was like, there was no, I just had to learn my own history and, read this in between the lines of the stories, but it wasn't a focus of anything.
You can also, if you're that same person, look at how fortunate you are to have basically that second lease on life, and look at everything in that, and through that lens. Like, there's two lenses, and one's super dark.
Right.
And then the other lens is,
we're going to rebuild.
It can't get worse. We've literally witnessed, and also probably some of it would cause you to realize how stupid most things are to stress out about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Choose what really is a problem. Like, is having 5 meetings back to back really a big deal?
Right.
Perspective. Yeah.
That was helpful on the loan. Like, any of the random suffering you're going through, it's like, man, I'm on a TV show in a really cool place. Like, I can't complain about anything, and having that perspective is very important. Yeah. For resilience.
That's it's amazing it's actually kind of the argument for, and a lot of times I find myself saying, like, why is the American policies in the military, why are we always going over being the world police? Like, why are we being the world police? Why can't we just stay home, mind our own business? That's their problem. They've been fighting for thousands of years. Right. Why is it our job? And you could argue, well, this would be actually a great case. Like, if there was an America back then that acts like we do today, like, would we have stopped that? Would we have stepped in? Would the UN have stopped in? And the UN, frankly, financed by the U.S. And France and England, stop in and say, that's not going to work, and save thousands of lives, right? Now, is that our job? Is that our taxpayers' job? Like, not necessarily, but, like, when you hear stories like that, you're like, man, tens of thousands of people.
It really is
a quandary.
It is a quandary, and I think it's, anytime you have a really simplistic answer, you probably need to dig into it a little more. And so just closing up and coming home's probably not the best option, but also the status quo also isn't. So how do we navigate those?
And who's more important? Like, oh, well, they're also performing some genocide in, this country over here.
Well, it's interesting. Sadly, like, Turkey and their neighbor Azerbaijan are still, like, hammering away at Armenia. They got 100,000 of them got ethnically cleansed a month ago from this region, and you just don't hear about it. It's not, like, on our geopolitical radar, and so
it's like, was it because they don't have enough oil?
Yeah, right.
Do they not have enough?
Then you just think, is it really that cynical? Where we decide to be involved really
based off of some minerals?
Right.
Yeah,
kind of interesting.
I don't know, because if you want to argue that it's the right thing and you got to fight for the unjust people, well, boy, you better increase the size of the army, because there's a lot more happening that we aren't doing anything about.
Yeah, there is definitely an argument to just being a beacon on the hill and.
Right. Lead by example.
But yeah, it's there's no easy solutions there. It's a really fascinating thing to try to just ponder, because even now, like, as America's taken some steps back from the world stage, you can kind of see as a global hegemon, there is a level of order that we kept out there. Whereas when we step away, it's just might makes right, and there's not really that. And sadly, when we had that power, we misused it too, and so it kind of is a shame, because we undermined our own credibility a little bit. But it doesn't mean we should just. Well, it might not mean we should just back away from it.
And it does show that projecting power, say what you want, doesn't matter, about Trump.
Right.
If you have a perceived crazy person in office that you think, like, that dude will nuke you, he's crazy.
Right.
That definitely seems to be something to keep some things under wraps, right? Like, if you have a, let's face it, a lot of those countries over there, everything is, including what you were just talking about, everything really is won and lost through strength and weakness.
Right.
That's what they know. That's what
Right.
they understand and respect.
Right.
And so with what you see happening right now in Israel and what you see Russia doing and whatnot, is it because they're actually not afraid of us? And who knows? Maybe it all still would have happened if Trump had a second term or third term.
Right.
Like, you
It's boy, you could all
talk
the
about
what
it.
ifs, huh? But I know it is a.
That's
whatever.
when you just go to the mountains.
Totally. It's so, so nice being up in the woods, watching the elk run around.
It all leads back to, can we just go hunting?
Totally. There's a lot of, it's all very interesting and important stuff to think about, but it is funny how much you can get caught up in things you have no influence over and allow that to really affect your day-to-day life. And yeah, it's true. You get back up in the woods and you're like, oh, this is what life's all about.
That's the thing.
And that
that's
flower.
The thing for people. How do you not allow it to affect your daily life, right? Because I kind of made a choice with MKC, you know, when COVID started kicking off and whatnot, back when 2008 crisis happened, I kind of listened to a lot of the news, saw a lot of what was happening in the housing market and the world's ending. And I kind of changed some of the direction that I was going at and basically kind of like took the safe route and let a lot of the factors around the world that probably weren't going to affect me makes my decisions for me. Yeah. And when COVID happened, it was more of a like, I'm just ignoring it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to turn on the TV. If I don't turn the TV on, it doesn't even exist. Right. It only exists when I turn that light box on.
Yeah.
And so kicking off MKC and starting the knife company and all the goals we had and every move that we made were all made without thought of like this other crisis happening over here.
Right.
And it's interesting because I've said before, if you shut your TV off and headed into the mountains and lived with the Ivanki.
Yeah,
right?
Right.
If you lived with the Ivanki people for the next 7 years and you came home and you turned on CNN, it would look like the day you left. Breaking news.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And there's some shit happening somewhere.
Absolutely.
That's a huge problem.
That was one of the things that stood out a lot on Alone. When I was on Alone, I was like, you're gone a few months and you get back and you check the news, of course, and it's like, oh, that's about the right amount of time for a news cycle,
Yeah.
3 months, come check in, you'll see what was the wheat and the chaff, and then
you
can move on. It's like you don't necessarily need to stick your head in the sand. It's good to know about stuff, but boy, the daily breaking news is a little over the top.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally you miss some big things. I've talked to some people that were hunting like in Alaska, 10-day hunt, and they dropped in on September 10th, 2001, and they hunt for 10 days and come out of the mountains and it's like
different world.
What?
Yeah.
No,
yeah. But that'll be on the news cycle in 70 days when you come out of the woods. You didn't need to check it.
And there again, there's nothing you can do about it. Like go back to the woods.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I've told my kids when we're over there hunting, like, this is really like you're seeing things in nature because of being out and hunting in the woods. You're seeing things in nature that most people in this country or on this planet never get to see. It's, I didn't realize actually really how lucky, and I look back on it now and I'm like, man, if I could go back and be a child again with my adult brain and like take advantage of where I grew up and where I lived and the fact that I didn't have any bills and I could do whatever the hell I want every weekend. I grew up in Lincoln on the edge of the Bob Marshall Wilderness, right? And it's just where you grow up. It's what you know.
Yeah.
But then now when I travel around and people would always come to Frenchtown or even to Lincoln and talk about how amazing our mountains were. And I always thought our mountains were kind of lame because I had been to Colorado or I'd been to Banff, Jasper, Alberta and British Columbia. And I'm like, well, our mountains are kind of fraudulent. Like if you go a little ways north, those are some cool mountains.
Yeah, right.
But then you go to like Ohio, Texas, and a few places, and you come home and you're like, oh, holy shit, we actually do have pretty
that's
good
what it takes. Like, and even me, I grew up in North Idaho, nice place, but you do take it for granted as you grow up there, and then it does take you leaving to kind of appreciate it and come back and be like, man, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Then you're set to take better advantage of it, which that was the case for me also.
My boy, he killed a bear last year with his bow. He was 14. He went right back here behind the house. He got up in the morning. We were in bed. He got up before light, went hunting,
Nice.
deer hunting.
Good for him.
And was back there hunting and, calls me at 9 a.m. and asking if he can shoot a bear. And he shoots a bear at 10 yards with his bow. And he does that all just walking out from his bedroom.
Yeah, what in the world?
And I told him, I'm like, at 14 years old by yourself. And I was like, that is like a percentile that you can't even write down. Like
low percentage of people doing that.
That get to do that, right?
Yeah.
And that to him is just normal. That's
right.
Like what you do, right? Like it's cool that it worked out, but he goes back there hunting all the time. This year he went back there chasing elk, and they were bugling all of it by himself.
Cool.
And I'm like, you guys don't understand how fortunate when I was on that Forged and Fire show, it was shot in the Bronx in New York, and I'd walk around, and that was very, very depressing for me because I walked around and I realized like you don't get to choose where you're born.
Right.
Like you could be born in Syria or Iran or, ethnic cleansing happening.
Right.
Or you could be born on the edge of the Bob Marshall Wilderness.
Right. Incredible, huh?
Yeah. And I walked around and I saw like thousands of apartment buildings with a dried up playground. And that's the only outdoor experience those kids are going to get. And they're going to have to be supervised to do it.
Yeah.
And
That's pretty wild. Having the gratitude for what we have is vital. And it's vital for anything, but yeah.
Yeah. We got married in Costa Rica and we took our kids down there and drove them around a lot and just showed them like how other people live. And to your point, also what you were saying earlier, like they were super happy, they were, and Costa Rica is it's
nice
beautiful.
Place.
It's a cool country. Yeah. It's a nice place, but like we were in a pretty remote area, very low income. We're not, those guys aren't running their kids to AAU sports and they're not doing a lot of stuff my kids get to do, but it was really good for my kids to see like what it's like in other places.
Yep.
When I was in Mexico and bringing videos home and there's a little girl sitting on a pile of garbage, right? It's like, man, to have appreciation for where you live and where you grow up. And also I tell people all the time, like, if you don't live in Montana, like you're not that far of a drive away. Like take a tent and a sleeping bag and come enjoy it. Like, get into the mountains, somehow like get out there.
Yeah.
And what it does for your mental space, like again, when I go hunting, like I really could just care less if I shoot something. Like when you're out there and you're in those mountains and you're listening, you see the stars and the creek running.
You're there. Yep. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It is. I totally agree. It's funny when you're out there, you're usually trying to do something, get somewhere or something. And then I often have to remind myself or the people I'm with, like, hey guys, we're here. Is it like, what else do you need? Look at these stars and the stream flowing and whatever. It's awesome being in the present and not taking for granted what we have. It's so amazing. We live in such a good time to be alive. Like the fact that food, we're not insecure in our food and in our basic needs means we have the whole world open to us as far as how we proceed forward. And what a blessing. My dad was comically like the most pro, he immigrated to the U.S. He loved it so much.
Really?
Yeah, he was. He didn't teach us any of the languages or anything like. He was like, you're American.
Really?
Yeah, like almost took it too far, but as somebody that had grown, seen something else and really appreciated what we had, which is, like you said, it's awesome. And it's very important to show anyone that. It's a lot of times when you hear people complain, there's always room for improvement and tons of room for improvement.
Yeah.
But you also have to appreciate what you have before you start tearing it down, because
what did your dad do when he came here?
He lived at his parents died when he was like 10. They moved here with his parents and then they died pretty quickly. And then he was raised by his sister on Coeur d'Alene Lake. Randomly.
Really?
So she had married a guy that owned, it was at the time called Squaw Bay Resort, which is some on the backside of Coeur d'Alene Lake there near Arrow Point.
It's a hell of a place to land.
What a weird place to land.
Damn. Some of the nicest real estate there is.
Totally. Exactly. So they grew up back there just taking care of that little resort and raised by his sister for the most part. And then he became an engineer and worked for a company in Spokane there.
That's amazing. Is he still alive?
No, he died in 2011. He didn't have a great deck of cards with his health, but but again, that was another interesting lesson for me to watch him go through. He lost his legs and lost the movement of his hands, real bad diabetes, but he was also had polio and all these issues. But watch him face all that suffering, like lose his job. So then mom had to go back to school and become a nurse. He just felt like a failure. But then he realized his value wasn't just in what he was producing, but in like who he was. And so then he had all this suffering he was facing. And he couldn't work and provide, but he could be an example to us as kids of how to face suffering and a bad lot in life with joy. And so, he right down to the end, he was joyful. And even though, pretty rough deck of cards, but again, I feel like that's probably was a similar trait in his parents, given what they went through. And it's funny, then you get on this little show and you recognize a little bit of that in yourself. You're like, oh, that's kind of cool how that something passes down.
How did you, when you were raised in, like, what age were you when you went over to Russia?
21-ish, 21.
So were you a kid, were you a kid that was always in the mountains, like when you were 16, 15, 16?
I wouldn't say I was always in the mountains. So because of my dad's health and stuff, he didn't hunt. He didn't do a bunch of stuff like that. So we did grow up on a farm, and we were always in the woods running around. But I didn't get into hunting until I went to Russia, really, and then started to get into it. And then, but I did spend a lot of time in the woods. Yeah.
Is that outdoors. Where did a lot of your like survival acumen skills?
I think most of them, what differentiated, of course I grew up in North Idaho on a farm, so you get this base level that we all get. And like you, when I went to Russia, I thought, I'm pretty good, with this and that and outdoors. And then it was just a whole nother level. Like I thought I was good with an axe, and there I am, like, now you got to cut down 1,000 trees and build a fence with no nail. It's like, it was whoa. So I think living there, whether it be with the fur trapper guy, he taught me a lot. He was a real, outdoor mentor type guy. And then with the natives, that's what set my skill set apart from your, typical outdoorsman here.
How was it that you went from Idaho to Russia to live with a fur trapper?
So I had
not the normal path.
Yeah, it was. I'd already not lived a really normal path. So I was, got a job when I was young and worked at Silverwood, and then did all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then working at a concrete factory, then worked at Lighthouse Salad Dressing. Pretty normal. And then my brother jumped on freight trains at one point in his life and rode freight trains all around the country and did it for years. He loved it. He loved the freedom of it. And then when I was about 18, I think, he invited me to come with him. And so I did, and I spent the summer in a better part of a year riding trains with him. And it was it was my first taste of freedom that, again, I'd only experienced living with the natives. And really, when you're in the outdoors for long periods of time, I was, man, the only thing I have to worry about is where my food's going to come from, And so that was pretty eye-opening. We had landed kind of in Virginia and doing construction down there. And then I have a brother that's adopted, and he wanted to find his biological mom and tell her thanks, And so he found his mom. Turns out, this is going to get a little convoluted, turns out she had a son, and that son was my age, and so it was my adopted brother's biological brother. And that guy was going to go over to Russia, and he was going to help this missionary guy build an orphanage and do all this and that. He told me about it. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And I prayed about it at the time and felt really strongly that it was the right thing to do. So I went over there. I felt like he called, I was like, okay, well, if I call myself a Christian, that's what I'm going to do. So I went over there, and then it kind of just went from there, honestly. I didn't know the language when I got there, but like I said, I wanted to live with Russians so I could learn the language faster. And then as I didn't have any agenda, I was just there to help build that orphanage. Once we did that, I was like, well, now I'm here. And then I met one connection, another connection, and just rolled from there.
Were those Evenki people religious?
No, they had shamans, their shamanistic culture, and they had all their shamans got sent to prison camps too.
Really?
Yeah, such a sad. But they had, what's left of their shamanistic culture is mostly just superstition. So, which were interesting to see at times when, at one point we had come across a tree that had been struck by lightning, and we had a fire, and I went to throw some wood in the fire from that tree. Like, no, don't do that. I was like, oh, sorry, it's how stupid of me. And then my wife, when she came over with us, she got sick, and they were like, swore she must have circled the teepee the wrong direction. Like, oh, don't be walking around the teepee counterclockwise. And then the other funny one, the one I liked a lot, was when we shot a brown bear. It was a big, long story. But anyway, we ended up with this brown bear, and they would cut the eyes out and put them under a rock. So when the spirit came back, it couldn't find him. And then they gutted it and threw all the intestines and everything in the river so that the guts would float down to the neighboring village, so that when the spirit did come back, it would think that village got him.
That's awesome.
I was like, that is awesome.
I love it.
But in general, it wasn't really anything robust. And we just, as friends do, talk about spirituality and this and that, and that was always fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's interesting,
they kind of have a
organized religion versus like, more of a spirits and, kind of like holy man type.
Right. And they have
beliefs.
A bit of a hodgepodge. I'd say three things have collided there. It's the shamanism, like Orthodox Christianity, and Soviet like atheism, and they're all kind of held up in the air together in a way. Like they'll have an icon hanging in their house, but anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But it leads to some fun conversations.
Yeah. What do you how do you feel like about being known as like the alone guy?
Oh, I mean, it's fine. Honestly, it leads to a lot of fun conversations. It was interesting because alone, for me, the actual experience of alone was an amazing opportunity. Would have never seen it coming. Like I'd be in Russia, like I should be getting a job or doing something, but somehow that worked out. But going on alone was not, that experience itself was not life-changing. It really felt much like a trip to Russia. And like the day after I got home, it just felt like I got back from Russia. It's like, hey, let's hang out with all the friends. And, there wasn't any culture shock or anything. So there was nothing particularly tangible about that. So it's not like it was a life-changing event for me. But the fact is then what came from that was all these connections, opportunity to do the work that I love, and blah, blah, blah. The results have been really amazing. And then, going back to your question, a lot of people, know me through that, which has led, quite honestly, to a lot of really cool friendships and relationships. Yeah. So that's been awesome. So I don't mind being known by that, even if it was, to me, like if I was to write a book about my life, it'd be a chapter. It wouldn't definitely be a book,
that's kind of what I'm getting at. Cause to some people, like the fact that like I went on Forged and Fired twice is like the biggest deal. Thing that, and I'm like, it's not that I'm embarrassed by it, but like that was just a little show thing that we did for 2.5 weeks. Like, and it's by far the least like important thing that I've done, like in my knife making career or whatever.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But it was much like Alone. It's also like there's a lot of people that can sit on the couch and be like, I could do that.
Right.
Like that guy's stupid. Why can't he start a fire? And,
totally.
That
why
guy's,
you watch.
Why, I'd make a knife better than that. Or that was dumb. Why did he do that?
Right.
Well, Alone's different from Forged and Fire, where with Forged and Fire, you go make something in front of America on a time clock. And it's basically a race, and you also have to do it better than everyone else.
Yeah,
and
that's intense.
there's pressure, right?
Yeah,
There's
pressure.
That part of it is more self-imposed pressure, and I actually felt when I went on it very, very relaxed about that part because it wasn't like this is the crown jewel of my career.
Right.
It's like, this is fun to do.
Yeah.
I'll give it a shot. Pretty capable. I'm pretty confident in my skills, but like maybe it doesn't go well, maybe it does. But like if I suck and it doesn't go well, like.
You got to be able to release your ego a little bit to do any of that.
Not going to end my career.
Yeah.
And but much like Alone, you're going up there and you're putting your skills on the line. You're putting yourself out there.
Right.
And to me, that's the lesson I told my kids. I said, the result of how you do on the show doesn't necessarily matter. It's the fact that you are willing to try something new.
Try it and push yourself.
To push yourself to a point where, like, very likely the odds say
you're
going to fail.
Yeah.
And you're going to fail in front of people.
Yeah.
And most people don't want to fail in front of people, right?
Yeah, I think that's you notice it in yourself when you do things. It's like, oh, am I going to say no to this just because I'm afraid to fail, or is it just my ego getting in the way, or what? And sometimes you have to analyze that in yourself, and if that's the case, you probably can ignore that. But yeah, and alone was a cool, not to downplay what a neat experience it was. It's obviously a unique opportunity, and never have I mean, it led to probably it's hard to say I had a more joyful time in my life than when I got that moose. Talk about pure joy. The pressure was on, like you say. It's like, if I don't kill something, I'm going to starve. I'm going to lose. And I've been getting all these rabbits and realizing that, holy crap, I can't even keep weight on even with 30 rabbits. What am I going to do? And the pressure, and I'm going to starve. And then boom, you get it. It's like, you couldn't even buy anything that would remotely replicate that feeling.
And it surprises me as a armchair quarterback sitting on the couch going, what are you doing? You're stupid. It surprises me, because we hunt, we also understand, there's kind of a small area around you as you're hunting that you don't want to disturb,
right? Because
you can push animals out of it. Yeah. And it amazes me how, when people go into an area, how loud they are. And then they're like, well, I'm going to pick my bow up and go see if I can see. It's like, dude, you ain't seen shit.
Right.
Like, nothing worth eating. I mean, you might kill a squirrel or something.
It's fun as the armchair quarterback to watch. That's why I watch too, critique it. But that's why I got on the show, because I watch and you're like, why aren't these idiots hunting bears?
Yeah.
But then you get on, you realize there's more to the story. Maybe there are regulations or what.
Right.
But
it is
But
surprising.
yes, it's very important. Like, you don't want to go out there. I mean, there's two things you need on alone. You need the mental fortitude and the proper mental attitude, like a positive approach to it all. And you also need the food procurement skills. And you don't want to be winging either of those when you go out there. You need them both. And so if you can't get food, sometimes that might be just location. A lot of times it's maybe you've never hunted before or never bow hunted, and you don't. It's a rough place to learn all the lessons you need to learn. So or maybe you just haven't spent a lot of time alone, and you didn't realize how many things were going to nag at you when you're out there, and how many how much unfinished business you have back at home. You have to have all that in order, and then you can do well. But it is funny when you got enough. But it's interesting when you go out there and you see things that you would definitely not do the same way. It's fun to critique.
It's if shooting a moose or one of those big animals is literally the thing that can win it for you. To then just hugely disturb an area and make it like, okay, well, you're gonna have to walk a mile before you have a chance of seeing something. And then you see too, some people spend an ungodly amount of time building a lodge.
That's the most mind-boggling one to me. I mean, that's the one I'm always fired up about.
The energy, like you're losing weight. You're beginning, the day you get there, you're beginning to die.
Yeah, exactly.
It's your first day of beginning to die. So,
you got a time ticking away.
Yeah. So we need to prioritize like our energy spent or time spent.
I agree with you. I mean, all power to them that want to build like cabins and stuff. But I'm just like, man, I cannot believe that's what's happening. I would definitely get out there. Tiniest footprint you can have. Like you said, I purposely moved my whole camp from where they dropped me off to a place that I could leave smaller impact. Yeah, it was with the proper wind going out to the lake instead of inland.
Yeah,
and then I got a shelter built in a day, and it's like, and now I got to just get food. If I get food, then I'll be warm. If I'm starving, then I'll freeze inside of a mansion. You know what I mean? So it's
if the next guy takes 12, 15 more days to build a shelter. I mean, that's a lot. That's 12, 15 days of lost food.
No matter how much you fish and hunt, you're always going to have a couple hours a day of downtime, and then you can, at that time, then you can tweak away at your shelter. But it's got to be, in my opinion, it should be the side note. Yeah. Whereas your food procurement, I knew for me, and I could have viewed it as a disadvantage, which I probably did. But being skinny, it was like, for me, I had no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah, did you not gain much weight before you went?
Well, I tried, and I did put on like 25 pounds. So that was nice, but
yeah, but that mmade you normal.
It just it made me normal, and it made everybody else put on 40, 50 pounds. Like, oh man,
yeah.
And so I had no and then when I got there, even at boot camp, and you saw everybody else, and they were a lot bigger than you, it's like, holy crap, that's a lot of fat to get in the woods.
They're looking at you like you look like you're already starving.
But that meant I had no question about I wasn't gonna get lonely. I wasn't gonna get cold. I was just gonna starve. And so it's like my only focus was food, to be honest with you. And the only thing that I stressed about, and I knew I'd been to Russia for years at a time, and I'd come back, and my family's still there. They love me. You get, especially in a window of, I wasn't expecting it to end in 3 months. I thought the show would go 6 months or so, but in a frame of 3 months, I remember they came out on a medical check and were like, it's been 66 days, Jordan, that's a long time. How you feeling? Like, 66 days. If I go back home now, and I literally will come in the house and say, what's new? And they're like, oh, nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
so it's all that perspective. I just knew it was all going to be food, and being skinny, it reinforced that. Like, I wasn't going to win a starving contest. There's no way. So I just had to get, and it had allowed me not to stress too much about what everybody else was doing. Cause it's like, well, either I'm sustainable out here and I've got a chance, or I'm not, and I might lose, But if I can unlock that little key to sustainability, then
the cans was so smart with the indicators, some of the trails you set up. Like, there was so much smart stuff along the way there. The wolverine was incredible.
Wild experience. It's cool. It's fun. And you talked about earlier, where'd I get the knowledge? It's also fun. It was interesting on the show. I noticed it as I was out there. About half of what I did was stuff that I'd learned, and which is really cool. And then about half of it is just ingenuity on the spot, not being afraid to try something. Oh, that didn't work. Well, let me tweak it this way. And then, eventually you iterate, not, that whole idea that don't be afraid to fail and do something dumb, but then learn from it and adjust it. And yeah.
What really is amazing to me, and I watch every one of these because, actually I'll set this up with a question, and then I'll kind of say this. How, even with a moose and all that, like how hungry were you? How sustaining was your supply when the show ended? What do you think?
It's a good question. So that can be a long answer, but I had a lot of food when the show ended. So I had, and if you watched it, you might not get that impression, but I had caught.
They're making TV.
Yeah. I had caught, I had 60 pounds of fish stored, and I had, a half a moose left, and my limit of rabbits, I forget if it was 10 or 15. And I had, a squirrel and a wolverine. I had a ton of food, and I weighed what I weigh right now. So I lost that first 25 pounds, basically the first month I was out there, which was concerning to me. But honestly, I think if in hindsight, it's like if I would have been on a ketogenic diet, I would have lost that no matter what. And then at some point you plateau off. But we didn't know our weights, so I didn't know if I was losing weight still or if I had plateaued off. Come to find out, I came out of the show and I weighed what I normally weigh. So I still had all my body fat to lose, and I had half a moose and all that fish, assuming I didn't catch anything else. I feel like conservatively, what I was aiming for in my head was if I can get to 130, 140 days, then I think I'll win. And I think I had that pretty in the bag. I just figured surely, I'd unlocked the fishing and was having pretty good success fishing. I'd gotten a moose, I was like, surely somebody else got something. And so it's going to be between me and them, and we're going to have to stretch it 6 months or longer. But I figured, honestly, if it goes through January, I've lived through a Siberian January. It sucks. And I think even if somebody had food, there's a chance they would quit. And so my goal was, I think, 130 days, which I think was get to the end of January. And then I could start thinking about maybe I might win. And I hadn't even entertained the thought before then. Like I thought, so when the show ended, I was like, hadn't even crossed my mind that it might yet. So it was quite a surprise.
Like, do you guys mind if I stay another week and eat some fish?
I'd asked them if Janet Lee could stay the night, and nope, they'd fly us out. I was like, darn. That's funny. What a waste of all that food.
No doubt. Well, the reason I say that is, and I don't know that I've seen all the other seasons and episodes and all that, but we've seen some of it. pretty much everybody else that I've seen, including the people that have won the starving contest. I'm not sure if I've seen, and it could be the way TV's framing some of it, but it does appear to everyone's starving. And I guess what I'm getting at is, to me, it shows how incredible the natives were, the trappers back in those days, back in,
guys going out on their own.
Yeah, I listened to Lewis and Clark's expedition, and you hear about them like crossing paths with a French trapper.
Who was that guy?
Yeah, like that dude's a savage. Like he's just rocking through Indian country, but what he was doing is he was trading with the Indians. Those guys were trading beads and furs and traps.
Right.
Like imagine if you're a native population and you're making deadfalls or you're doing whatever you're doing, traditional stuff, and a dude brings an iron trap along.
Oh yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
it's a game changer.
Yeah.
Not to mention a gun.
Yeah. No, I think I lost my train of thought.
Well, it's just amazing to me that with all of our technologies, our Kuyu and our Sika gear and our base layers, all the technologies that we have, and those people go out and in 60 to 90 days they're starving to death.
Yeah.
Like no time. And in actually some of the nicer weather of the year until it leads later into fall and winter.
Fall's a great time in the north. But no, there's a few factors involved. One is the locations matter. So I was fortunate to be in that Northwest Territories, those far northern regions, similar to Siberia. And I knew, like, I don't know what it's like up there exactly, but I know there's a path to sustainability. Like, I didn't have to think that it might, it doesn't necessarily have to be a starving contest. And knowing that was all I needed to know to have the confidence to give it a whirl. I lost my train of thought.
How far ahead did you know where you were headed?
A couple weeks, I think. They give you a general idea and then a little more specified. I think generally, like maybe a month ahead of time, they're like going to Northwest Territories. Then a couple weeks before, it's like Great Slave Lake. And so you have a little time to whip up some research. It
also surprises me the people that decide to just not fish.
Yeah, and that one I will say, I'd be shocked if it wasn't just the editing. Like I'd be shocked if somebody didn't fish up there. I know some of the people that have been on the show, and they didn't. And people are, and even me think, I wonder if they fished. And it's like, heck yeah, I fished all the time. They just didn't make the show. And like you on Forge and Fire, I was shocked at what they didn't show of me. There's a lot of effort that goes into creating suspense. I was like, man, I can't believe you didn't show. Like, I'd caught the biggest fish of my life up there on a homemade rod. It was so fun, and I saw it ahead of time swimming like a shark, through the water. I was like, dang, look at that lake trout. And then, like 15 minutes, caught it, and you're just like reeling that thing for 8-10 minutes, all on film. I was like, I can't wait to see that again. And then they just skipped over it. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Dang it.
I do wonder about that. The challenging thing would be self-filming everything and just like filming as much as they want.
Yeah, for sure. That for me, again, there's all these things that are perspective. I know a lot of the guys on my season hated it. And I mean, it was my fault, but I can sort of co-blame filming for missing the first moose that I missed because when I grabbed the camera and on the rush, I didn't grab my quiver because so when I shot, I was like, oh crap, I grabbed the camera, not the quiver, and then I watched the moose run away, and that was that. But that said, I actually kind of liked the camera because I'd done all this stuff in Siberia, and I was conscious at that point in my life of the fact that I don't have that great of a memory. I did all this cool stuff, and it's just gone. And it actually was a really cool opportunity to be able to share all that, especially with people that I care about back home.
Did they give you the raw footage that you were able to just share?
No, they didn't.
I figured they didn't. Yeah.
It
is really cool. That's one thing that will live on forever is like your great-great-grandchildren will be like, oh, my great-grandpa, never met him. He was dead before I was born, like he did this cool stuff. And they actually have like evidence of it.
I mean, how cool would that be to have of your grandfather working whatever he did?
I say that.
Mine over in Iran. I found that to be a big motivator. I said yes to the show initially because, you can't say no to an opportunity. Like, use my skills to maybe make a big chunk of money. Heck yeah.
Yeah. Well, and have fun doing shit. And
like a free moose hunt and a this and that. It's like, okay, I'll do it. But then you get out there, and I realized that on a deeper level, that was a big motivator. It's like, man, what would I do for this? Like, just a snapshot of my grandpa in his 30s living in Iran. Like, what was that even like? And then
I say that
That'd
my
be so cool.
great grandfather or my great grandfather, they kind of homesteaded the Two Dot, Montana area and started a butcher shop.
Oh yeah.
And I have a photo of him standing next to my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather's like 6,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a knife laying on the block, and I have that knife.
Oh, cool.
But like, what I'd really like is an hour of video of
Him
what
doing
did they
his thing.
sound like, what did they look like,
Right.
what was like, what did they act like,
Fascinating. Yeah.
seeing them working and cutting up meat, and what did the conversations like when Jordan and his wife walked in to get some meat,
Right.
and
Right.
what did that all sound like back then?
I agree. I think that's really cool. And if you're conscious of that while you're out there on an experience like that, it's kind of a cool opportunity. So the camera's annoying, but it's a really cool opportunity to share that. And then you can like, well, who are you going to be to those people? Somebody that's whining the whole time? Or,
Yeah.
I couldn't be anyway. Sometimes.
That is the ego side. The ego side of me would be like, I really want to cry right now. But
I don't think you can fight it too long out there. Like you're gonna like, I guess, I don't know. It depends on how you are, but
I'd cry off camera.
Yeah, totally. I did laugh to myself. Like if I never had a breakdown out there, but I thought, man, the people that do like have different cousins and friends than I do. Because man, when I get back, if I cry, I'm never gonna hear them.
You would just get random texts.
Oh yeah.
You would just get a random text or a screenshot of you bawling,
Yeah,
and it'd be like,
totally.
oh God,
Never live
this.
it down.
Yeah,
I told my cousin that the other day. I couldn't cry out there because I was thinking of you.
yeah,
The
100%,
amount
dude.
of crap I'd get.
Oh my God,
No,
for
man,
sure.
but it was really hard.
Yeah. I do notice and I think this is like for life in general. I think what's really interesting, and I know a couple guys that have been involved with like training Navy SEALs, right? And going through like the BUDS process and whatnot, and the failure rate at BUDS. And you see these guys that come in, physical specimens, right? And you think, dude's going to cruise through, right? But what breaks him is the mental side,
Right.
Right. And not always, but often.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is you'll see women up there. A lot of times the women actually do really, really well because they kind of just have the like walk out and they're just like, God, look how beautiful the day is.
Great.
And like, it's not like, oh God, I got to get a fish today.
Yeah.
I got it. And you do see like more high strung tension guys of like, I got to get a fish today. I'm going to die if I don't in 3 days, I'm dying if I don't get a fish today.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the psychological differences there. Like some of those women that have been on there have like gone through a lot of starvation and suffering and had maintained a real positive attitude, which is pretty cool. It's pretty admirable.
The one gal from up northern.
She's awesome. Callie. Yeah,
is she?
Great. Yeah,
she's just like,
cool
my feet are freezing off, but I'm happy.
I was impressed with her because she was, 11 days away from, winning with the other guy.
Yeah.
And they pulled her, and I personally would have been mad.
Oh, I'd have been pissed.
And she was just like, okay, still smiling. I was like, geez, good for her.
What is it?
Get a long ways
yeah,
on that.
she's what is it? Is it
attitude
$500,000
like
or $1 million or something?
That season was
for
whoever
her?
made it 100 days would split $1 million.
So
she would have gotten $500,000.
I'm like, you can have a couple of them toes.
I'll at least risk it.
Yeah. It's like it's not a foot.
Totally. I would have been pretty upset.
Oh, it would have been really upset because she was super great attitude.
Oh yeah,
and she was gonna make it there.
And she's that way in real life. Real cool person.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So how did it end up? This is totally changing gears here. How did it end up that you hosted or not hosted? You were on the Daily Show.
Oh yeah. So on one of my courses, a guy, Michael Costa, came on one of my wilderness trips, and he was the newscaster for the Daily Show. When they go to, hey, over to you, Bob, and he did that, and so he came out a couple years ago, and his time out there had been really impactful. He really, enjoyed it, and we kept in light touch here and there, just checking on each other. And then apparently Trevor Noah quit or something. I haven't been following it, but Michael became the guest host, and so he's like, hey, I'm guest host for a week. I'd love to have you come be my guest. And of course, I was out in the woods elk hunting or whatever, so I didn't get the message. And they wrote me some emails, and then finally Michael wrote me on Instagram, and I came out of the woods. I was like, oh crap, that's like, oh no, I can't remember. Anyway, that I got the message Oh yeah, I came out of the woods, got the message, but I had to take my cousin back in to go elk hunting, and so I literally got out like, holy crap, sure, I'll do it, in 3 days. But then I had to get my cousin out in the woods and then get back, get on a plane, fly to New York. It was a pretty chaotic week, but it was a cool opportunity. I think I was super disappointed because I was exhausted, tired. I had been elk hunting, so you sleep badly, and then I had been, early flight to New York. Anyway, I was super tired, and he wanted, and I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I was like, maybe we're just going to be BS in here. I don't know. But then he was like, oh, I kind of want to talk about conservation and the value of conservation. I was like, oh, that's such a, to this audience, that's such an important conversation to people who usually don't see the other side of hunting. And so I really wanted to represent it well, but my neurons were just misfiring. I was like, oh man.
I thought you did well.
I'm glad. It was fun because they posted it, on the internet, and then I posted it on my Instagram, and it got a lot of traction. A lot of people it started the conversation, but when I had to go on below the Instagram post and fill in my real thoughts because I was a little disjointed in putting it together, but it got the conversation started.
And you can't get your thoughts out on a.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you
right?
on there? How many minutes are you?
Right. 6 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Can't be too hard let's also solve Ukraine-Russia in the next 6 minutes.
Totally.
To try to really understand conservation and what hunting means to conservation and wildlife and public land use and hikers and bikers and how this all ties together in 6 minutes. Boy, you'd have to have a team of people write you a 6-minute speech that you didn't stop and take a breath on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I feel like I'd thought about it enough that I felt like I could have spit something out real good, but it just wasn't happening. But that said, good enough. Like you said, it's a short form deal, so you can't.
It's cool to me of him that that he had you to discuss the topic.
Absolutely, I thought that was really cool of him, and I thought it was cool of the Daily Show to push outside of what they would normally do. And I know I can read the comments. They get
hate.
A fair number of loud people how dare you give him a platform?
He's a murderer.
Yeah. And so good on them for the broad horizons on that one. And it was cool of Michael to invite me out specifically for a conversation that's outside the box for that.
It is, yeah. And it's so much easier. I mean, when you were on Rogan it's so much easier in a podcast forum to sit there and even if you stumble across,
I didn't say that quite right.
Yeah, I want to go back and say this too, or And when I was just on, I don't know what it was, a month ago or something. I was on Fox News.
I saw that.
People that haven't done that before don't understand how fast that all happens. And there again, there wasn't. We didn't meet with the hosts and put together
what
a plan of
about.
No, they kind of throw things out and I was actually supposed to do some grinding demo thing outside. Got there, then it changed to inside. Then it went to no, you can't grind because they're worried. The producers are worried about the sparks hitting the floor, and I was like, well, these sparks aren't they're not going to start the building on fire. Right. We're fine. Nope, can't use it. All right, we're going to go out there and talk, and then 10 seconds before we go on, when the hosts walk up, he's like, can you turn that thing on? Can you grind something? Yeah, but the producers don't want. I'm like, okay. All right, we're live here, Josh Smith, blah, 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 blah. And then he's like, can you grind something? And it's like, all right.
Sure.
So all that stuff is just kind of.
Winging it. Yeah. Yeah.
Improvised.
Exactly. So you want to be crisp.
Yeah. And then there again, in 30 seconds, I'm supposed to get across what our company's doing and try to make this marketing pitch somewhat in an authentic way that tell America about what you've done since you're 11 years old.
Yeah.
And I too, you walk away from it and you're like, God, I kind of shit that one.
I told Michael that afterwards. I was like, I wish I would have been more crisp. He's like, it wouldn't be TV if you didn't think of a better way to say something as soon as it was over,
So I haven't watched The Daily Show since,
Jon
what was his name? Jon?
Maybe.
Yeah, Stewart.
Yeah, me neither.
Forever. So your clip, I was like, all right, I'll watch I'm going to definitely watch this. Then I started watching, I went to his Instagram and started watching a few, maybe it was YouTube they were popping up. I don't know what. I watched a bunch of his clips in a row. That dude's actually good. Like, he's funny.
Oh, cool. Yeah, good.
That guy's...
He's a good dude. I like him a lot. Yeah, yeah. I said, he was somebody that was willing to come out here with an open mind. And then, you know, he's from New York. He's got that whole thing going out here. You meet a bunch of people with, you know, Trump stickers on their truck, and you all get together and you go up in the woods and you just all see each other for who you are. You're just people. And then for him, you know, that was all new to him. The fact that, oh man, he had to kill that fish or kill that animal to stay alive, and it broadened his mind. And yeah,
that gives me a huge respect for that guy. Like, I can, and I don't know the guy. I don't know his politics, and I don't care.
Right.
I can share a hunting camp with that guy and hang out with that guy if he's open-minded enough to just come like experience our world and be in it and hang out and be a cool dude and just try things that he's not normally done before.
Right.
That to me says enough about a person of like, we could be friends.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Maybe there's topics we don't agree on. Maybe there's even topics like that.
Honestly, you don't have to even filter people through that though. That's what's cool about the woods. It's like, you don't go through this phone filter or like this political filter. You're just people out there.
Yeah. And you're all tired or hungry or struggling or having fun. And that's the great thing about it. It's also kind of that way with like going to knife shows. When I'd go and display at knife shows, I sold knives to people who voted left, people who voted right, people who didn't believe in religion, people who were crazy religious. Like, but when we were just talking about knives and about making things and the outdoors and whatnot, it's like an equalizer.
Right.
You know,
it's cool. It's cool to connect with people on what you have in common. Obviously, everybody's got something not in common. Right.
And then, So what else do you do besides, is your courses and your teaching kind of your main thing?
That's my main thing now. I've got, we recently bought an outfitter, so I've got an outfit to run. So we're going to do, you know, a handful of mountain lion hunts this winter and wolf hunts. And then we're going to do, because I do have a lot of these summer courses, I can kind of not hit the hunting too hard, you know, so I can kind of just pick and choose what I think will work well out there. Yeah, which I think is really cool and a unique possibility for me as an outfitter. So that's cool. Been organizing that, and then, that is most what I do. I have some rental houses I renovated when I was in Virginia, and
The outfit. Do you want to shout that out or say?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you go to jordanjonas.com, you can look at my courses, and you can write me. And right now I don't have my like hunting opportunities up yet, but you can send me an email and we can just organize something. I'm just going to do, like I said, I've got 4 mountain lion hunts combo with wolf that I'm going to do this winter, and 2 of them are booked and there's 2 spots open. So if you want to get one of those, go ahead. And then do some bear hunts this spring and a few elk hunts in the fall. Just do a light touch out there.
Where are you basing those out of?
It's out of Idaho. Out of the Bitterroot, yeah.
Okay. So you're living in Montana, but then going to be guiding out Idaho.
Yeah. But it's all based out of, my home.
Right over the mountain.
Right over the mountain.
Yeah, I've been down through, hunted in the Selway, some of that area, and to your point, people come out to this country, and that particular region, the Frank Church, the Selway, that shit'll bust your ass.
That's rugged country, man.
That is some rugged ass country.
My friend who's going to help guide these mountain lion hunts, he was like, man, he guided up there for 11 years, but he was saying that he had a bunch of these doll heat sheep hunters coming in, and they were just like, man, this sucks. Yeah. This mountain lion hunt. He's like, at least when you're hunting sheep, you get to the top at some point and you're like flat. It's like, here, you're.
Those mountain lions, you turn loose on a mountain lion with dogs, they might run 100 yards and run up a tree, and it's like the easiest thing you've ever done. Or you might just keep watching your tracking collar going and going, and just snow's getting deeper. You're like, oh my God, yeah. And in that country, in some places, it's like, well, we can drive. There's a logging road that goes around the other way.
It's all on foot.
Yeah,
it's rough. But no, it's cool. I like the wildness of it. It's one of the few places outside of the north and outside of, that you can really get that.
It is, yeah. I mean, I tell people will ask when they're visiting here, like, hey, what's right behind your house back there? Because there's a mountain right there. And it's like Boise.
Yeah, totally.
Because there is, I mean, besides Highway 12,
Yeah.
there really, if you look at a map, is nothing but.
Yeah, it's super cool.
It's cool. It's a
What a
huge, and when you fly over that country, over like Lolo Peak going south through those Bitterroots and into Idaho, and you fly over all that stuff, like in a small plane, you really realize that like if they had Going to the Sun Road through all that country,
it's epic.
It's epic.
Yeah.
People would drive all over and hike all over that stuff, but thankfully there's
it's
no
a secret for now.
Exactly. Thankfully there's no good road through it.
Kidding. Yeah, no, totally.
Not that we're gonna tell you about anyway.
No, it's a great place. We're really blessed to have access to something like that.
Yeah.
Jeez, what a
awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. I know you got to drive home a little ways, and the weather. Thanks for busting through the. Of course, we decided to do this in our first snowstorm hits.
Threw my snow tires on last night. So.
Did you? Yeah, the roads are going to be icing up tonight.
Yeah. Oh, cool, Josh.
All
it's
right.
been a blast. Yeah.
Appreciate it, man.
Cheers.
All right.